Hi, everybody, and welcome. We are here today talking about a topic that I am sure is relevant to lots of people. We are talking about managing and supporting challenging behavior at home, but bringing out the best in everybody. Today, we are living in everyday days where we are trying to figure out our new norms and um, we're just making it work day by day. And so we are here to basically give some tips on how to make it work and bring out the best in everybody. And today, I am joined by two phenomenal colleagues of mine, Miss Heather Kochnier and Miss Dominique Loving. And so I'm going to turn it over to Miss Heather and have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, and tell us a little bit about who you serve and the population that you serve.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate with this group. It's really exciting to hear things that you and your organization have been doing, and how you're supporting families during this time. So thank you. My name is Heather, and my last name is Kokenar. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. Currently, I'm practicing and licensed in Maryland. I do in-home behavioral services for families of children, young adults, and adults with varying intellectual and developmental disabilities. I currently also provide consultation in school systems in DC. I've also worked in residential settings and day programs out on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and supervise people who are obtaining their practical or their credential through practicum placements at Johns Hopkins and over at George Mason. And I also offer mentorship to new BCBAs, and specifically in how to write for medical necessity and understanding insurance, because as we all know, that's its own language and its own beast unto itself. And my undergrad and bachelor's degree and my master's degree are in special education, so also have that background and spent many years doing infants and toddler services, and currently just trying to get through this pandemic and be a support to other people. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Heather. I'm sure you will be an absolute asset to this conversation.
Absolutely.
I also want to introduce to you Dominique Loving. Dominique, introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about your background. And I also understand that you are a mom, experiencing this from twofold, professionally
Yes.
and as a parent. So tell us a little bit about that.
I am Dominic Loving. I am the clinic business manager for a local therapeutic practice that offers ABA, speech, and OT services. I've been in the field for about 9 years. I am also a registered behavior technician, and I've worked with clients in the home, in school settings, in daycare settings, dealing with behaviors. Right now, I am a mom. Trying to get this distant learning thing going, and I completely understand what parents are going through. And as an essential worker, I'm dealing with, my husband is actually sick right now, so I'm dealing with him quarantined downstairs, and just trying to navigate life with this new norm, as they're saying, that it is. So, yep, thank you for having me, and I am really excited to get into it.
Well, that's awesome. So we will definitely tap into you. I see you smiling as you talk about your new norm.
Yes.
One thing that we keep talking about is this new norm that we have to create due to this new situation that we all find ourselves in. And one of the things that I continue to talk about are prioritizing and what is this new norm, and what the normal that we always created for ourselves, or what we used to create for ourselves, is no longer those things that were familiar. Heather, what do you share with families, or what recommendations do you give for families in terms of priorities or prioritizing what their old norm was in terms of creating a new norm for themselves?
Sure. So the first thing usually when talking with families is, what are you experiencing right now? Like, what are your biggest barriers or frustrations or things that you're seeing for yourself and for your family, and how you're trying to support them during this time? Because each family structure, as we know, as a society, is so different. depending on, is it a two-family, two-person household? Is it a single mom? What are the resources and the things that you have access to or you don't? Maybe the first thing is just figuring out how to, get resources that are needed, if that's a piece, or they just really want to know how to log onto the internet to talk with you, or how to, so sometimes it's just the basic things that we take for granted sometimes, depending on, where we are in life. Too, it might be, I want to know how to communicate with my child to, or what does a daily schedule look like now? Like, now that we have no school, how do I set that up? So it really is about figuring out need, what are the priorities, and for each family that's so different and it's so individualized.
That is really, really, that's really important. And I heard you touch on two things. The resources that are available, and can also be an asset or can be a challenge. Priorities for one family may be different for another. As we create these new norms, we have to build our priorities based on our resources. I think of my own situation. Technology is definitely an asset to me because we're all familiar with it in my house. But while technology is an asset, we had to go into my mother's house in the beginning of this, and we had to kind of reteach her all the current technology just to access, communicating with her. My mother's a little older, you know, um, so she wasn't as savvy in terms of, Zoom and things like that, in terms of communicating now that she's stuck in the house. And so those priorities and figuring out what those challenges are for each individual family are super important. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So if you're out there, if you're out there watching, help us participate in the conversation. Let us know where you're watching from. If you have some specific challenges or questions for either Heather or Dominique, or you just want to participate in the conversation, let us know what you're thinking. What are your challenges? Tell us where you're watching from. Dominique, as you experience your little one, what kind of challenges are you having? You mentioned that you have a kiddo that is doing some distance learning. What does that
Mhm.
look like in terms of trying to access technology and doing school in terms of your priorities in the house?
So thank you for asking. It has been hard, to be very honest with you. I feel like the schools were not prepared for this type of transition, and it's been hard. And I know that for parents who are not as tech savvy, I know that they're not going to be able, they haven't been able to access it at all. He's now working on like 3 different platforms to complete his assignments, and sometimes I don't even know how to
Sure.
complete it. Um, so it's been very difficult. The biggest thing with me is structuring my day, because I have to balance out my work and his schoolwork, and then being a mom, and then being at home, and then dealing with that. So I try to putting together a schedule each day. Each day he works on 2 different subjects, and he does his homework. He navigates the system, but it's been a struggle. And so I understand a lot of times when my families, when we've reached out to provide services, they're like, not right now. Let me get this
Mm,
distant learning going first. And then once they've been able to kind of, prioritize their schedule and get their schedule intact, and they allow for additional therapeutic services to be pushed in during their day. But that structure and making sure that I have my schedule is the only way I've been able to kind of like function, because I'm used to being able to go to work and be at work, go at home and be
sure.
home and be mom. So wearing those hats at the same time has been difficult, but the transition is happening, and it's slowly but surely becoming my new norm.
Sure. As a service provider, as one of those essential service providers, specifically for students with disabilities, what have you noticed, or have you seen a change in the behavior? Or have parents communicated with you that the behavior has changed for students now that are home that used to receive services? Um,
Mhm.
and if so, what advice have you been able to provide to families, or what tips have you been able to provide families to have some continuity from what the students used to have on a weekly basis to now transitioning into the homes?
So one thing is I tell our families, one, to get a schedule and kind of stick to it as much as you can. It helps to create that new normal for the client and the child, so they can know what's going to happen throughout their day. I also try to tell them to implement some type of movement activity during the day. A lot of our clients are used to going to school, having recess, being able to interact with people, burn off some energy. Now they're just kind of like stuck in the house. So just making sure that they are planning that input each day. They're getting some type of sensory input, going for a walk, going in the backyard if possible, circling around the block, just something to kind of get themselves moving and get some fresh air. And then I always tell our families, like, make sure that you understand, your clients, your child's motivations. Make sure that you're motivating them throughout the day. You're providing some type of attention throughout the day, so they're not fighting for your attention. That's, of course, we know that's when behaviors definitely increase.
Sure.
And then I always tell our families to just make sure that they um, are taking care of themselves, because that's been my biggest thing, is making sure that I have time for myself at the end of the day. Because it becomes overwhelming.
Sure. Heather, any additional tips? What kind of tips are you providing to your families in terms of additional things they can do at home to bridge that gap between the services that students used to receive in schools and providing them some continuity between what they're currently doing at home?
So to piggyback off of what Dominique said, beyond, setting up a schedule that's tailored to each family, would be, thinking about, now that they've been home with their child for a bit, is when is the best times of day that your child's most available for the learning, and maybe you need to make some revisions. Maybe what you first thought, when you first got started, isn't actually the case, or maybe it is working and you feel like you can add some more to it, because our schedules are going to be very dynamic, right? Because as we know, each day we're waking up, we may have different energy than we did the day before. And the same thing with our children that we're working with, that we may need to make adjustments, and they may be more fluid, than we would typically have experienced in the past. And that's okay. Or if you're having a rough day and it's not working, to give yourself and your child that permission to, maybe today is a down day. It's okay that, maybe they're having some extra screen time, or I'm having that extra cup of coffee. Because if you're able to give yourself permission to pause, breathe, and take a break when all these other extraneous and hugely overwhelming stressors, for whatever reason, whether it's the child, the parent, just that day, or everything's building up, you got to be able to give yourself those opportunities and to model that for them, because they may not understand, depending on their how they're functioning, developmentally, cognitively, socially, and all of that, what's going on. And to see that calm presence, or you taking that time for yourself, it's going to speak huge volumes to that, to your family and your child as well. Some of the other things we've been talking about are, if how can you connect with your teacher? Like, if you are doing distance learning, they're going to be the best go-to person, because as outside providers, of private services, or even, medically necessary services, we're not going to be as familiar with the training they've received. And we want to make sure they know, that can help reduce their stress. Do you know who to go to ask if you have a question? Do you know, if you are struggling with the, IT part of it, or the connection part, who to ask for, or how to get that? And that might be the first thing. And they're like, oh yeah, I can figure that out. And just them having someone tell them something, which may sound simple, could reduce a lot of stress, because they may be so caught up in it that they couldn't see that they could do that for themselves. So there's a lot of empowerment pieces, talking them through using the resources that they already have, and just having a sounding board, somebody to bounce things off of, and to give them that outside perspective that you really are doing great. Here's some other ways maybe to look at it, or reframe how you're viewing it. And here's some other things you can think about considering, either adding, taking away, or just doing differently. We've talked about, maybe how you're presenting tasks. So like, if you're doing a reading comprehension activity and they've been typing all morning, can they just orally tell you the answer and you type it? Like, is it really that, it's your word, it's their words, you're just typing it for them? Or do they really need to do reading and math back together? Maybe they do reading in the morning and math in the afternoon, or, talking with the teacher about what's realistic for your family expectation wise, and also keeping the mental health of the whole family system in place.
I love that, Heather. I think the things that you're bringing up are really, really good. Both Heather and Dominique, two things that I heard you both say are that mental health is really, really important. Your own mental health. I think both of you have reiterated that you can only take care of your family if you take care of yourself. And I think that's a reoccurring theme that is so, so important. There's a comment from Eileen Matthews. When you create a schedule, make sure it's a success schedule. And I think both of you have commented on that. A success schedule allows you and your child to cross off the things that you've accomplished and you feel good about yourself. Make sure you all agree that some of the scheduled activities can roll over into the next day. And I think that is so very important because without feeling success, it's always going to be a failure. And so, as you create these schedules, it's not a schedule that has to be the same each day. And so, I love the idea of creating schedules, plural, plural. You can have multiple schedules throughout the entire day, and you both alluded to the idea of schedules, and you both alluded to the idea of mental health and staying healthy. So, I particularly have 6 kids. I have 5 boys and 1 girl. So what does that mean? That means lots of energy. Okay. And so what I have noticed in my house is that boredom heightens opportunities for misbehavior. Simple as that. And so as a parent, what I noticed is that uh, we are just bored here. I mean, there are only but so many activities I can come up with. We are at week 6 or 7. The reality is we can only go but so many places. And so what do you do? I mean, how far can we take creativity? Any suggestions for those kids that are just in that stage where they're just bored? What would you what advice would you give where the kids are just coming at I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, and the misbehavior is just spinning? What advice would you give to those families?
So I'll go. With as far as with me here, I think initially we were only thinking, okay, we give them activities, they do their schoolwork, they do their therapy, etc. But I try to incorporate a lot of like home things. So activities where if I'm cooking now, he's washing dishes. Um, or if I'm cooking, he's cooking alongside of me so that I can still get things done. I just incorporate him with it. He's vacuuming. He's doing things he's never had any interest in doing now. He enjoys the fact that he has chores because it gives him something to do. He's making his bed in the morning. He's vacuuming with me. So this is an opportunity for our families to begin to incorporate some of those home chores. Even it can be as simple as drying off a dish, or putting dishes away, or helping you guys make the pillow, make up the bed, putting the pillows correctly on the couch. It doesn't have to be overly creative. Just incorporating what you do on a daily basis and sharing some of those responsibilities with the kids. It kind of empowers them in the same instance as well. And then a lot of times I tell our families, like our families have been very happy about being able to implement the services themselves because now they're feeling more rewarded. Like, oh, wait, I can do this. And they're also coming with more suggestions on their own because, at the end of the day, the parent is the expert on the child. But definitely incorporating more home things. He's been outside cutting grass. And I think I've learned a lot more patience with him. Just being able to kind of show him things that I do on a daily basis to keep him from just being bored. So yes, that's what I do. And I'm hoping that he does not come in here with this mask on that he's been wearing. So if he does, please excuse me.
Sure, I love that, Dominique. And now that you said that, my 5-year-old the other day asked me, could he load the dishwasher? Something he's never asked to do that before. Heather, do you have you had a way to figure out how to help families to kind of put on a different hat and understand how some of those household chores that they're doing may look like supporting therapy goals, Like, for example, Dominique mentioned vacuuming, which can double up as an OT goal, for example.
So some of the things, to piggyback again off of some of the themes, like if you have a child that can match, sorting silverware, comes to mind pretty easily, or matching things by category, or non-identical matching where you have, not all your cups in your house are going to look the same. So definitely incorporating, goals from your clinical practice, or, the treatments or the treatment plans, or even the things you've seen your child accomplish in private therapy outside of the home, can easily transfer over into home-based routines and activities. Absolutely. So it could be as simple as, sorting silverware. It could be, folding laundry. It could be just picking up their toys and putting them back where they got them from. It could be as simple as, like going, unloading groceries from the car, the delivery service, and putting them where they go. It could be, playing with your siblings and sharing toys. It could be communicating, requesting, whether you are pointing, gesturing, vocalizing, using a device or pictures, what you want, or describing how you're feeling in a moment, or answering questions throughout the day when you take pauses, or if you're even watching TV together, like you can pause the TV or the video and ask them questions that might be from their speech therapy session, or when you're reading books together, you're pointing out pictures, having them identify things, find things, all of those different things are really nice, natural carryover. And as far as the boredom piece, a couple of things that we've come up with is, if the children or even the teenagers or younger adults are able, having them even make up their own lists of things that they like to do. Because sometimes they'll get stuck in loops like we do with the same, like we eat the same things all the time, and then just putting it into a great big jar. And then and you could call it the boredom jar, and then they can go in and draw out an activity, and whatever they pick, they can, at least try, or they can pick something else, but at least it keeps the ideas fresh, for somebody. So if the parents want to call, you could say, hey, go to the boredom jar, or go to the if you don't want to have it sound negative, you could call it something else, but like the idea jar, and go pick something out, go try it for 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. Just because sometimes, my parents, when I was little, there was 3 of us, and we had a bunch of toys, and they would kind of put stuff away and cycle through different toys. And just because we hadn't played with it for 6 months, all of a sudden it was super exciting again. So if you have a bunch of toys that you have put away, even bringing out old toys that you haven't played with or they haven't seen in a long time can generate new play ideas. So different things that can empower them to make choices or have different ideas, so you're not the one they always have to go to figure out other play ideas with too. Or them knowing in their schedule they have on structure time that they have to begin to self-direct. Like, this is time that you have to figure out what to do with yourself, so that they don't become dependent on you. And sometimes that can also let you know that there are some, skill deficits or areas where they need some more structure, or they need more ideas or how to play. And that's also something, if you are, connected through telehealth, that you could tell your therapist, if you're still connecting with them, like your speech therapist or your OT therapist, and even, working with that outside provider, get some other ideas. Like, I know every time they play with cars or just crashing them, what else can we do with them? Sometimes just bouncing ideas off of other people and your support system can be helpful for that. And sometimes giving them that room to struggle a little bit is not so bad, because it creates the motivation to want to be creative, be curious, and try something else.
Sure, absolutely. These are all great, great suggestions. If you're listening out there and you have some questions, or you're dealing with some challenging behaviors, ask a question or a comment, and we'll see if we can address it. Keisha Berry out there says, great suggestions for incorporating therapy goals at home and helping parents to facilitate learning. At this point, I think a lot of families are just dealing with very stressful situations. We are all pretty much outside of our comfort zones, and we are trying to make the best of all situations in terms of our schooling situations and some of the behaviors that are not characteristic of our children that we're starting to see. And so our stress levels are kind of slowly rising. what would you suggest, or what have you suggested to your families in terms of dealing with the stress, and how does that play out on the priority list? Um, what are your feelings about dealing with stress, Heather?
For stress, most of the things I would tell families to do with their children, I would say look at doing for yourself. And what I mean by that is if you are noticing that your child is starting to breathe more rapidly, their heart rate is going up, that their shoulders are up around their ears, that you're
Mm,
feeling that way yourself, you need to take that pause. I think it's that old adage about the oxygen mask. Like you need to put yours on first before you can put it on, somebody else. That take a moment, take a breath, and pause and check in with yourself internally. What are you feeling? Can you put words to what it is that you're feeling in that moment and how that's influencing your perception of what's going on with your child? Because even if they are unable to put the words to it, they can feel that frenetic, static, like that static noise that you hear on the TV and your energy when they're around you, and that's going to feed over or bleed over into their behavior and how they're perceiving stuff. So I think you need to take that moment, even if they're falling apart, it's okay. Walk away,
yeah.
like go off if you have, wherever you can get to, even if it's in the same room, but you're further away from them where you can just breathe, bring yourself down back to center, and then think about how you want to react or triage that situation. Because reacting from a stressful point of view, if you're really stressed out, you're not going to be able to look at it in a very holistic perspective or have that broader perspective. And of course, nobody's going to be perfect and do that 100% of the time. But if you can just pause before you react, you're more likely to break up that circuitry of that reactive knee jerk reaction and have a better perspective, or tag out if you do have that luxury of having another person in your home, or somebody else that you can do that. Maybe that's the part like in wrestling where you have tag team, you can tag out to another person and ask them to step in and help you out so that you can calm down. Or if you need to take your phone and go in the bathroom, go in the bathroom and have a call with your mom, your girlfriend, your buddy, whoever, saying, this child's driving me crazy, what do I do? And they're like, take 5 minutes for yourself, let's talk it through, like what in the moment's going to help you manage your stress. And then as far as the child goes, once you are calmer and in a better state, you can then kind of think about, have they eaten something recently? Like, is this a low blood sugar issue? Like, is it, that they've been fighting and grumpy? Did they sleep well? Like, look at biological needs. Have all of those been met? Then look at, how long have, like Dominique said, which was a great suggestion, they've been in the house all day. They just have all this pent up energy and they just really need to go outside and blow off some steam. And if they can and it's rainy, what can they do inside that I can set up or provide for them? So that you're able to kind of go through the basic stuff that you do have control over, and also realizing this whole situation probably makes no sense to them, what's going on right now. Like, or they have some idea, but it still feels weird because nobody's in their normal routine.
Absolutely. I have to admit that I tried a couple of those strategies and they're very effective. And so I can resonate with a lot of those. So there are a lot of parents that I believe that will take heed to a lot of those suggestions. Dominique, what about those kids? A lot of students don't use the typical way to communicate. Don't use verbal modes to communicate. What suggestions would you have for those parents who don't have students or children who use verbal modes as a primary mode of communication? What tips do you have for those parents in terms of expressing themselves when they're stressed?
Um, so for one, I would first reach out to the speech pathologist, whoever, if they have a speech pathologist that they're working with, to make sure that they are using the same communication that they've been working with them on. And if they don't have a form of communication right now, we could they could possibly begin to use pictures that are pretty easy for the family. It could be as simple as a happy face and a sad face. Like, how are you feel? Are you feeling sad? And they can just draw it and have the client either point to it, or you can direct them to it if they are feeling some kind of way, so they can be able to express themselves. I know that's when a lot of behaviors do happen when client is trying to communicate effectively, and the parent doesn't know, and the parent is trying to get you to do something else, and they're trying to tell you, no, I don't
Sure.
want to do that. So I think really finding out what form of communication works best for the client. If they're working with PECs in their speech therapy, then you should continue with the PECs at home. If they're working with ASL and speech therapy, then they need to continue with ASL at home. The good thing about PECs and ASL is you can literally go on Google and you can learn ASL really quickly with some of the basic words: happy, sad, if you want to eat, if you want to drink. So that's one way. And then we can always do pointing. You can have the families work with the client, just pointing to what their needs are. Providing options and letting them choose which ones they want to do. So yeah.
Absolutely. These are all great strategies. I mean, a lot of times we feel like we need to replicate exactly what the school is doing, but the reality is that at home you can have a whole separate system, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
In stressful situations, a lot of times for nonverbal kids, the spoken language or whatever system is in place, a lot of times that is where you get your most breakdowns. And so that is where the grace comes in. For the stressful kid, if they tend to be a talker, when they are stressed out, you may not get the words. That's where you use alternate modes of communication. That's where Dominique's comments or strategies of if you are typically a child who tends to be able to communicate, you may resort to pictures, or you may resort to giving choices as opposed to expecting a child to explain things. Children with autism or autism spectrum disorders tend to be very rigid with their schedules and changes of schedules, and so times like this you can expect a lot of children who depend on schedules a lot to have more and more breakdowns in terms of their behavior. But we have to change our expectations in terms of what we expect as parents, and then we can support them. That's where we know we have to add more supports. In terms of minimizing the loss of these skills, I know that a lot of parents are thinking they're not getting their therapy the way they should be. A lot of kids are not eligible for teletherapy, given one reason or the other. It may be because they're just not ready, because they don't have the necessary skills to access teletherapy, or it's just not available schedule-wise, or for whatever reason. So parents are concerned about the backsliding of skills. What do you communicate with those parents in terms of their concerns about their kids backsliding in skills? Are there ways that they can work on the skills at home, or what do you say about the parent who's overly concerned, Heather, about their kid taking steps back in terms of their therapy support?
So the first thing I would say is that, again, since this is such an unusual time, that how they're functioning right now may not be truly who they are. And that even though we don't know what the new norm is going to be, that we're going to have to take it step by step and take a look at, how can we make sure that they're okay? And what I mean by that, each child's version of okay is different. So like, are the things that you're saying that they're losing skill wise is because they're trying to cope with an environment that they're not comfortable with? And what does it look like when they're in their happy, regulated, and engaged state of being? What does that look like? When they're available for learning, what does that ultimately look like? And how are they able to exhibit that when their schedule was more routine? And what did you do to get them there? So maybe we need to back up, and how do we get them to that state first? So, do they need more downtime, or do they need a little bit more structure? And then you're starting to see what that optimal level for learning looks like. And that's where you're going to want to start first with triaging that. Then are the skills that you're worried about them losing, are they truly really functional and important for them right now? Like, is it that you're concerned about them losing sight words? Do they really right now in the middle of a virus, pandemic, need to know first grade sight words? I mean, maybe for that family that is important, or would it be more, keeping them safe and happy, and they're getting their behaviors under control, and then they're starting to maybe communicate differently. So it's looking at how do we get them to that state of learning, consistent schedule, and then look at what's functional for the environment and what they're in now. And is it possible, as we've seen in a lot of probably adds if you're a social media person, like where the teacher's saying, you know, we can get these skills back later. It's more about keeping them safe, functional, and happy right now, and then, you know, making it through the day to day that we get to that point. And I think if parents are comfortable with that and see that every parent has that capability to do that, then shaking off the stress of teaching academics that right now, be honest with you, like if the world ended tomorrow, they wouldn't really need to know that. That's the most important part. And that's kind of where we need to start, and giving parents the okay and the permission to shake that off and be okay with that. And that's what I honestly would tell pretty much anybody, whether their child was high functioning, low functioning. I hate using those words, but on that spectrum of experience, that's really the most important part. Because I know when I'm dysregulated, I'm a hot mess, and it's not going to go well, whatever you're trying to ask me to do. Like it was a big, you know, mental adjustment just to start practicing, because I've done some telehealth, but like, you know, doing that and using all these different platforms, and then to have a whole different, you know, central nervous system and way of viewing the world and trying to figure all that out on top of it, forget about it.
Heather, you mentioned the word dysfunction. Can you describe or talk about that word dysfunction when you refer to yourself as feeling dysfunction? What does that mean? Heather, you have yourself on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's
So
okay.
initially, I felt like I wasn't able to do. It was mourning the loss of the day to day. So like being able to go from, you know, like, you know, getting up and just getting in my car and seeing my clients to, wait a minute now, you know, like I can't go out there, you know, like even though it's essential, there's some families that are opting not to do services, or, you know, like, you know, it felt very different. And, you know, like it wasn't, you know, like how, like when I say functional, like, you know, your functional day-to-day schedule. So
Sure.
I can only imagine for somebody who's not able to necessarily put words to that, or is functioning in a different capacity, you know, how different that's going to feel. And that's where, if you don't get all of those pieces together and you find your own level of functioning, and then you try to put yourself in somebody else's perspective, that's got to be all sorts of weird.
Absolutely. Well, so today, I mean, every time you turn on the news, I think part of the dysfunction that we're feeling, I think, is fed by the news. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fear that's like fear that's just feeding our souls at this point with all the misinformation that we're given. How important is it to make sure that we are dealing with the misinformation, or allowing or correcting the misinformation that our children are accessing? How do you deal with that, Dominique, especially with your son? Now, how old is your son?
Sorry, so he's 5.
He's 5. So how do you deal with the misinformation of information just about the pandemic that's coming into your house?
So I try to control a lot of the TV time and what we're watching on TV. He's aware about Corona. He calls it Corona. Why can't we go anywhere because of Corona? And he has a hard time understanding why Daddy can leave the house and go to work every day, but he has to stay home. So I just kind of try to explain to him as much as possible. This is why we want you to be safe. You have to stay home. You have to wash your hands. Make sure that we're staying clean, getting germs away. I just try to filter all the information to come directly from me. So he's not just hearing a bunch of different things from different media sites. Because I mean, honestly, the different media sites confuse me when I'm listening to it, because I'm like, wait, that person just said you can't go anywhere. This person said goes for a walk. This person says wear a mask. This person says don't wear a mask because it doesn't matter. You know, so it's just I try to just be the main voice that he is hearing, so he's not hearing a different opinions from different sites or different media sites. So he has a clear understanding. And so when he has questions, he's also asking me, you know. So open communication for sure.
Sure. Heather, what about you? How important do you think it is to correct the misinformation that students or children are receiving in terms of it relating to their stress level?
So I really have tried to point families to look at primary sources of information. So like to go to like the CDC website or the Associated Press if they're going to be wanting to share information, and then to try to think about what is developmentally appropriate, like, and if they have some questions about that, because one of the biggest questions I get from parents oftentimes is, I know, especially if it's a child with a disability or a diagnosis, I know that they're not their chronological age. So we try to sit down and have a conversation about where are they really developmentally and what would be appropriate information to share, and how do you scaffold that and provide that to a child, or even a young adult who may be functioning, say they're 13 but they're really 7. Like, what does that look like? And I think some of the things we've talked about are, social narratives or social stories that are at the comprehension level with visuals that make sense, and what the child really, or the individual really does need to know. Like, what is it that's going to keep them safe, and sort of let their questions drive the process. So if you have someone coming to me, hey, what's COVID-19? It's a virus. Remember when you were sick and you had and you had a virus? Yeah. And they go away. That might be all you need to say. Or, if they have more detailed questions, like Dominique was saying, like, why can't I go out? Dad can go out. Well, and then you think about, how do you answer that? Like, is it, because every family has been parenting a little bit differently. Some parents do take their kids to hiking on the trails and walks with or without a mask. And then you have to filter that through your family norms and your social values. And then you kind of come up with an answer that makes sense for how you're going to parent, or, navigate this whole pandemic from your perspective.
Absolutely. So for parents who feel like the pressures from school, that they have to teach these new last few concepts, we have a month more of school, the school is sending these things, how important do you feel like it is to prioritize this last month of school in terms of given all the situations that we're dealing with the pandemic and things, how important is it to teach these new schools for parents, especially of those with disabilities that are dealing with all the other things, new structures, new priorities, just getting together home life and dealing with the therapy services and trying to implement lots of this themselves. What would you say to parents who feel the pressures of having to teach these new skills just this last month of school, to feel like they have to keep going with their kids' progress at home? Dominique.
So my advice would be simply to push through it. It's right now trying to figure out your priorities and um, structuring your day. I know that it's hard, but to kind of just push through it and reach out for help. If you have issues, reach out to the teachers. If you have a therapist, reach out to the therapist. Try to get as many strategies and as much help as you can possibly get, at least to try to push through. You don't want your kids to fall behind. It's not it while like Heather said, if the world ended tomorrow, these skills may not necessarily be important. But if it does not end, we don't want our kids to necessarily fall behind, because sometimes that impacts them emotionally as well and mentally as well. Um, my biggest goal, I can only tell you what I would tell myself, just kind of push through it, use as many resources as possible. Um, while educating your kids is not as important as keeping them safe, you still want to make sure that they're still on the right path once this pandemic is over, and that you got it. Like you can do this. Like you really can do it. And I think that was even for me. I work with children directly, but I'm not a school teacher, so teaching my son was a totally different world for me, and it easily became overwhelming. So just my advice for a family is take a deep breath. You can do it. You're smarter than you even know it. Reach out for help, and use your resources wisely. Google is your friend. Um, and just make sure that you're taking time for yourself. You got it. You got it, and you can make it.
Heather, what would be your advice for those families?
I would say, you have to feel it out. Like, I know that sounds really weird coming from a behavior analyst, but I think you have to speak your own truth, and you have to know what works for, you and your family. And because I know I'm in a different state right now, but I know in Maryland, they're extending it to May 15th. We don't know if they're going back. I mean, there's a
Right.
possibility. The other part of that too is, nobody knows yet how they're going to grade that and how that's going to be, looked at, and how IEP goals are going to be measured. And so I think you want to do the best you can, and give yourself a lot of slack, if, and a lot of forgiveness. If you don't get through everything. I had a mom that I do telehealth with, who is lucky enough to have that thought she saw all the learning units she had to get through, and she thought she had to do all of them in a week. And it was like 36 or 60. And it was actually, that was what they were putting on there for the month. So there's
Oh,
also
wow.
like families that, are getting so much different information from different school districts, and figuring out what level of support, and the teachers are trying to figure out. So I think they're, like Dominique was saying earlier too, everybody's doing the best that they can. Do what you think you can do. That's what I would leave it with. If you think you can only do one, do one. If you can do more, but don't be, I can't tell you how to feel, but I would say do what feels right for you and your family and your child. And then, you can keep pushing through, or if you need to pause. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get to where you need to be.
Sure, sure. Share your strategies with us. Post in the comments and share your strategies of how you are keeping yourself safe and together, and what are you doing to mentally keep yourself together? What are your strategies? As an essential worker, Heather, it is so important that if you, like you said, put the way the parents must put on their oxygen mask to serve their children, as essential workers, you all must put on your oxygen mask to serve others too. What are you doing to put on your oxygen mask and keep yourself all together? What are you doing? What are the things that you do?
One of the big things was I recognized, since everything went to telehealth, and I also felt that the stress and the pull of my parents are older, was that I left Maryland. I went to Florida, and I've been down here, and you're all kind of knowing the need to be, with your family and supporting and taking care of, not that they're elderly, but, older folks, and then them knowing that I'm safe. So like recognizing your own stress levels, what can you do and what can't you do? Also knowing what the needs are, for your clients, and how that affects your energy. Like, what are the best times of day for you to schedule, so that you're also not working, because there's going to be extra stress and extra energy. You're going to feel more tired because nobody's done this before.
Right.
Nobody knows, like, how this should go. Like, we're all feeling this out. And so you may need extra sleep one day, and you may need the same thing that you're promoting to your clients is what you want to do for yourself. The other thing I would say is my faith. I am a born again believer, and I do get up at around between 5:30, and I just spend time in the Word. I spend a lot of time reading my Bible, getting my head on straight. I call it in the morning, and in my coffee cup, and I spend a lot of time in prayer, centering myself and figuring out what is it that He's calling me for that day, and ask Him to fill me up, because I know if I'm in His way, it's not going to go well. It's going to be a mess. And then I try to think about, towards the end of the day, what do I need to do the next day? Or if I wake up and I feel kind of, lethargic and I need extra rest, I give myself my rest. I'm giving myself way more permission to have longer periods of rest in between things than I used to, because I'm recognizing that need. And the other part I would say is the same things, like I'm getting out and walking every day, like just getting out and doing a quick 30-minute walk outside makes you feel less claustrophobic and the walls are closing in on you. The other part is doing some art myself. I'm doing some adult coloring books. Those are fun. We've painted rocks here. The other part is my sisters are down here, so like getting together, to each other's houses and having dinner and spending time. We're also gotten really big on takeout, which I know not everybody can necessarily do, but it's kind of nice some nights to you're not the one that's having to cook or figure out what to make, and then if you can venture off and do that. We've also used a virtual platform and did family game night with everybody in different states, and we did Family Feud one night, we played Password one night, just so that people who don't have that option of being able to travel to family can still be connected with others, even if it's not exactly the same thing. And I would say the last thing is just, again, that internal check-in. Like, I can't stress how huge that is. Like, if you're really not in tune with yourself, you can run yourself into the ground really quickly and not be aware of, all the different things that you're called to do on a daily basis.
What about you, Dominique? How are you keeping yourself together and healthy?
So what I've now learned is really making time for myself, which has always been something that I've had issue with. So now it's like, okay, I'm feeling burnt out. So I really try to make time for myself. If it involves me staying up a little bit later at night, make sure the house is quiet and then it's my time, or getting up early in the morning. Like Heather said, reading my word, spending my time with God, and just like communing with Him. Putting all my burdens there. I also make sure that we go for walks during the day. I mean, and sometimes it can be as simple as taking a bath. With candles. Um, Painting your nails just to make you feel pretty. Things we're used to being able to get out and do. Just making sure that we're taking that time for ourselves, putting on a face mask. It's really little things. Making sure I eat, which I forget a lot of times. So just really kind of stepping back out of all of the hats, taking them off, and just wearing the hat just for me has really been helpful and instrumental in me just keeping my sanity.
These are awesome, awesome ideas that I hope that a lot of people take heed of, because keeping yourself mentally healthy and putting on your own oxygen mask is definitely important. Laura West made a comment that she takes time to practice self-care and encourage self-care amongst herself and clients. She's found the joy in holding daily morning meetings with her kids, which is sometimes familiar to them. It helps ground them and give them some normalcy during the pandemic, which I love that idea. Christy, one of our other HSLDA consultants, says that she thinks it's really important for our teens to be able to communicate feelings, so they know how to communicate and vent to their friends. Finding other kids are doing the same thing as parents. We can talk and use them as sources of support. Community is important even if we are together only by phone or screen. And so whatever your strategy is, you do need a source of support. We as parents and professionals need a source of support as we embark on supporting our students, clients, and children. And so make sure that you're taking time to put on your own oxygen mask, because that's the only way that we can serve others. So Heather and Dominique, I thank you tremendously for your expertise and your personal and professional advice. This has been amazing, and I hope that we have blessed you today. I hope that you have been able to take away a little bit of something from this amazing discussion, and I hope that this has helped to bring out the best in some of you. So until next time,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
having
I
us.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Take care and be safe.
You too. Bye.